Ladies and gentlemen of the House, we are facing an issue right now with with online harassment becoming something more and more common. It is we spend big chunks of our lives online, be it by spending time on the internet, be it on social media, be it communicating through emails, Skype, etc. And there is a very pernicious form of abuse that has been developing a lot lately. That is this idea of online harassment. So what do we mean by online harassment? We mean the exercise of psychological violence online, that is in any form of online environment. That can be a forum, but it can be also a private chat, it can be a chain of emails, it can be your Facebook feed, but it's basically psychological violence, insults, that kind of stuff that is happening online. Now, when we are saying that this House believes it is legitimate for individuals to punish people that they deem to have committed online harassment by revealing their identity online, we actually mean that it can either happen to you, you can be the victim of this abuse, but you can also witness this abuse, for example, on a Facebook feed, for example, on an online chat. And in that case, we think it is actually legitimate to turn the spotlight on the harasser instead of the harassed. Harassed people are usually taken into become the targets of hateful email, of vengeful comments, etc. And we have seen lately that there is a trend of starting to shame the harassers into stopping the harassment, and very much support from the side of the internet community in order to dampen the effects of online harassment. Yes, I will take closing.
Okay. Harassment is most of the time a process and not targeting on a single time. How can a witness know if it's harassment if you just see in one Facebook post?
It is a question of how people feel about it. If you have this feeling that you are witnessing a case of harassment, we believe it is absolutely legitimate to result in a Italian-like situation where we are actually turning the odds against the harasser, and we think that eventually it is a good thing, because it will make the harasser conscious of what the situation is, and even if it's not maybe on a legal term or from the perspective of a psychologist, full-fledged harassment, it can be a dangerous situation that is avoided by bringing awareness to it, by bringing also the people's awareness on a larger scale. Now, I just want to precise that when we say, when we talk about revealing their identity online, we mean actually giving personal information that allows to find that person, maybe also in real life, but basically Facebook information, addresses, email addresses, that allow also other people who are outsiders, maybe professionals, to take contact and intervene. Yes, sir.
Okay, why is the courtyard in the process, a legal process, not enough?
Because the legal process takes time, and it's very difficult, to prove, and we think that it is actually something very positive, that with the time people start being more aware of the situation, start to recognize the situations at the best. And even if what the opposition seems to be saying, it's very easy to deem something harassment, and it's very easy to have the people's information out there, etc. Well, we think that eventually, if we get to a situation where everybody has been accused of harassment, everybody will be more aware about it. Everybody will have been in the situation of having been accused of, or having been harassed themselves. And at some point, it does raise the awareness, and it will actually kill the harassment eventually. It is basically a self-regulating mechanism. Yes, of course, sometimes it was. Sometimes you think, oh, if I want to get rid of that person, I could harass him by saying that he harasses me, etc. But then it can also work the other way around, and eventually you just get to the situation where everybody is deemed the harasser, and there is no harassment anymore. Yes, so basically what we are aiming at here is this idea that what we have been seeing more and more on the social media, these situations, these horrible stories that all of a sudden surface of things that have been happening online, and people are telling, either people are telling their own stories and they get a lot of support, but also you have a lot of other people starting to contact the harasser and try to mediate the situation, or to shame the harasser, to harass the harasser. And I think that when you fall victim of your own crime at some point, you start taking another perspective on it and the way you behave. And eventually you grow out of it. Or, well, in the worst case scenario, yes, we are in an Italian-like situation where people just avenge themselves, where people just take revenge one after the other, and it never ends. And that is sad, but I do believe that after a time people are also able to become more self-aware, more intelligent, and they are able to see where they are going.
How do you think this connects with like the principles of our legal system, which is basically the rule of law, the principle of fair trial, whereas you would have a fair trial even if you committed something very much harder?
Well, in this situation, by making it public, we are actually reducing the situations where it is a matter of life and death, because very often the real risk behind harassment is people falling into depression, people falling into forgetfulness, people just barricading themselves home and completely disappearing off the face of the earth, eventually committing suicide, etc. That is the real risk. The one thing that we want to prevent from happening. And by bringing public spotlight, by bringing awareness, by bringing people who are able to help, we are actually reducing those situations. So yes, the rule of law in many situations where there is actually a risk of life and death is a very good thing. But in this situation, we think it is much more important to help the victim, to raise public awareness about this, and this. And by publishing the information about the harassers, by shaming the harassers, that is what we are achieving. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much. And now it's my pleasure to call upon the leader of opposition. Thank you.
Hello everyone. So, what our case is going to be about is how the impact of this policy is not actually going to solve the issue, it's actually going to encourage the behavior we try to prevent. And I'll show you that in my constructive case. Let me go on to some rebuttal. First of all, they told us that they didn't frame the motion at all. So we do understand that even minors will be judged upon and will be and their identity will be revealed. So for example, they talk about psychological impact. Well, let's see what psychological impact it will have on a 14-year-old who, yeah, just made something stupid. Why? Because he is a minor. He just found out that he can post everything on online. So now suddenly you have people harassing him back for having a harassing behavior, and the psychological effect on him is far greater than the harassment he actually did. Why? Because it's not now a person harassing another person, it's a whole group of people who have found out the identity against one person. So we do see that the psychological impact they're trying to prevent actually backfires and is much worse, especially in minors, but also, as I proved my case, for everyone else. Second of all, they told us how, from the PI of the closing opposition, they told us how courtyards are not efficient. Why? Because they take lots of time. Okay, let's fix the judicial system. Second of all, because it's hard to prove. But what they came up here and said is that if you are a user of Facebook, may understand harassment, but a prosecutor will not. We don't have exactly how a prosecutor who is trained to do exactly this, to understand when a crime is permitted, is not enough, but suddenly me just browsing around my Facebook and I see harassment, I'm suddenly now, I suddenly understand now the whole situation, and I'm able to prove that this person is harassed, and I have the right to actually call out his identity. Third of all, he talked to us about how this measure that they'll bring increases awareness, but he didn't prove to us in any way how advertising, speeches, or any other measure that we are trying or we could try isn't the most effective, isn't the one that we should have tried. So we do believe that the awareness through this measure will not be successful. So, so the impact it's going to have on the whole situation here. It's going to be based on two main reasons. First, on reputation, and second of all, how it's going to encourage the behavior we try to prevent. First of all, the reputation. People make mistakes. People go online. People believe that because they have a nickname, they can just say things. But just because someone saw a post and responded to that post with a harassing message doesn't describe him entirely. I mean, he has an entire personality, he has an entire life. We do not understand how from one comment you can suddenly create, reveal his identity, and therefore create a whole profile on this person, which is going to be public on everyone. It's going to be public in his workplace, it's going to be public for his society. So we do see that, for example, if in his work, if the manager is not happy with him, and if he sees that suddenly he's afraid that his company may have a bad reputation because they have harassers in their company, he will get fired. So we don't see why. We see that there is. It's very important to keep the identity safe and keep it only in official courtyards and not just reveal it spontaneously, because the effects it's going to have is far worse and cannot be limited to the person's identity being informed. Do you want to say something?
Yeah. Revealing the identity online to everyone is the only way to catch the attention of the official authorities, because they are like so busy, they won't have time to respond to all the requests that people send them, like, oh, I was bullied, can you help me? No, only we have this media attention can regard the official attention.
So what you're saying is that we don't have enough prosecutors. If that is the problem, please find another way to get more prosecutors to solve the problem. I mean, if that's the problem, really, this is the least of our problems, having not enough prosecutors. And we can also make more successful mechanisms in order to find harassments. So the impact it's going to have on the reputation of the reputation of a person, only judged upon one comment he made or one harassment he made, may have a huge impact on him, on his family, because he will be. This will be a family who has a harasser, just as we have in our society a family that has a drug addict, which is then labeled as a bad family which has not succeeded in something. So we see that the impact it's going to have on the reputation, not only of him, but of a larger group of his people who aren't the ones who are actually harassing. So his family is not the ones responsible for his harassment, but they will be affected. We have not seen anything making them safe. Second of all, about how this is going to encourage this behavior. So, as we have seen now with the case of the doctor who killed the lion, people learned his identity, and what did they do? They started harassing him through Facebook. They started harassing him in front of his doctor, in front of his working place. So we do see that this this identity revealing is not actually helpful. It actually encourages the behavior we're trying to see, we're trying to prevent. And we do not see how, by making it more, by polarizing both sides, is helping in any case, since the government, I believe, is trying to stop harassment. And second of all, if a person reveals my identity because I harassed a person, I'm actually going to be angry at the person who revealed my identity, and I'm going to try to find who this person is who identified me publicly. So again, we have a case where people will be polarized and will be encouraged to harass even more and more, online or offline, just because their identity was revealed. So for the reasons that the identity will not prevent, but it will encourage harassment, we are proud to oppose this motion.
Alright, thanks very much. And now it's my pleasure to call on the next case. We increased platform.
All right, thank you very much. So what we're doing here is making internet a better place for interaction. So we're also at the same time we're aligning it with the outside of society and with the rules of behavior that we think are suitable for there. So what this is going to lead to in the long run, which is the logic that I'm looking at, is that it will improve the interaction and tolerance between individuals interacting in an online communities and online places in the long run. So what I'm going to talk about is that, first of all, quickly, that this is not even that big a change, as we already have much of internet non-anonymous, it's going to be because you have it. And then secondly, I'm going to really go in depth into how misinterpretations actually lead to better interaction in the long run. So a couple of points that the opposition brought forth. Okay, they talk about the effect on children and minors. Now, yes, that's something to consider, and we're not actually saying that you should probably, it's a nice idea to reveal identity of a 6-year-old making random comments. So there's some sort of, this is not exactly black and white in that sense, so we can use some common sense in whose identity should be revealed. But also, if this happens actually someone reveals a minor's identity, and then it's also in this regard a self-regulating system, because people will see that as well, and actually the person who is revealing the identity is going to turn out to be much of a more ass in that situation, and they are going to be facing judgment by doing that. No, thank you. So it's going to self-regulate in the sense that those people who are going to, cause harm to children are going to be judged for that. So then there's the idea that, okay, misinterpretations come from because you cannot have full information from, say, one comment or one line of text, and that is true. You cannot have full information. You cannot actually know what the people, for certainty, what the people are saying, whether they are actually harassing you or not. And that's the key here, actually, that we acknowledge that, and that there are going to be mistakes. And this is no, thank you. This leads to two things: that we acknowledge that there are going to be there are a lot of mistakes, a lot of misinterpretations. This in my constructive argument, I'm going to come back to how these misinterpretations are actually going to help in the long run. But secondly, I want to point out that the fact that there are so many misinterpretations, say 80% of maybe 80% of what people read, they misinterpret that. So if you take that into consideration, it also means that you cannot have a court system deal with these harassments, because you have so many false situations, so you can't exactly put them into the courts, because there's a mass of these cases would be flooding the courts, and obviously we don't have resources for that. So the whole thing is that misinterpretation actually make the court an impossible way of dealing with this. No thank you. So let's quickly go over that. This is not even that big a change, because we have the non-anonymity of internet becoming actually the norm. You have the reason that we have Facebook logins, for example, on many forums, commenting places, and so a lot of social interaction happens in the place where you actually have to have your own name, and you have pictures and people can easily identify you. So it only covers a very short, narrow range of situations where you don't have the identity already. And these situations are something like, well, they are anonymous forums, for example. But we believe that anonymity should not be used for these kinds for as an excuse to harass people. It should not be used for that purposes, and therefore it should that's an abuse of the benefit of anonymity. Yes.
If the judicial system doesn't have enough resources, why not just ban the accounts of those harassing and limit one mail per account?
Ban those who's harassing. But there you're already saying that you have a system that then dictates that this was an actual harassment case. So in that case, if you ban the account, you have already gotten it through some sort of system that has determined that this was a harassment case, which does not, it's the same thing as having you cannot have people evaluate these. It's the same system where you can't have them going through courts. So, okay, anonymity is moving aside anyway, and it has also worked to reduce bad behavior. This has been seen that a lot of bad behavior has been rooted out by having Facebook logins, for example. So, now the key thing here is actually, and this is what we're saying, is that how misinterpretations lead to better interactions in the long run. Now, again, let's say that 80% of what people think the other person is saying online is wrong. It makes sense because it's only text, and you have your own mindset when you're reading that, and then you might get insulted. Okay, you might even feel okay, you're harassed. In some case, in extreme cases, you might feel you're harassed, even though the person might not even mean that. Okay, so what happens here is that then you react in that framework. So even if the first comment was not towards you, was not negative, but if you interpret it in a negative way and you answer in a negative way, at some point this sort of a chain of misinterpretations is going to lead to a point where it becomes actual harassment. But it all begins by people assuming that they know something. People assuming that they know what the other person is saying, then putting too much of a probability into them actually having the correct interpretation, and this cycle continuing, and then at some point you have actual harassment. Now, the problem here, big problem in online, is that you don't have any other cues than text, so people are more likely to do this mistake. They do it in real life as well, and real life communication, but it's even more so in online. So what this does is sort of creates an online environment where it seems that people are more hostile towards others, that people are more intolerant, that people are behaving in a more negative way because of the misinterpretations and the escalations that come from that. Now, how we see this in the long run, if we say that it's okay to publish identity of those people. Now, obviously, you're going to publish identities of those who are not actually harassing. But when this happens enough, what you're going to have is people's identities revealed and then called harassers, like the large number of people being accused of being harassers, and then the accusers also being accused of harassing a person by saying that they are a harasser. So you're essentially bringing awareness to the fact that you should not be interpreting so much. You're bringing awareness to the fact that you are making mistakes when you read online, and it's going to also lead to, when you see this happening, is that you look at text and, okay, he might mean this or he might not mean this. But what also happens is that you're going to be more careful about your own communication, not limiting it, but trying to clearly communicate sort of your intention as well, trying to avoid the misinterpretations yourself. So you're going to be more aware of how you produce your message, and you're going to be more tolerant towards others' comments because you understand that they probably didn't mean anything bad, but, so giving them a benefit of doubt. So we believe that in the long run, by exposing this sort of illusion of interpreting things right, you're going to have an internet which actually behaves much better and is self-regulating itself. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And now it's my pleasure to call on the deputy leader of opposition. Yeah.
Right, thank you for the floor, Honourable Chairperson. In my constructive case, I'll explain to you exactly why it is the role of the state, and why we need to have judicial systems which are way better at dealing with such circumstances compared to a sort of Wild West, which is completely unregulated in this case. But starting off, so some points of rebuttal. The first point of rebuttal had to do with the fact, that we should support an eye for an eye sort of policy. Now, besides the fact that most of our Western cultures have moved and evolved from such a sort of policy for a variety of reasons, and some of these practical reasons are also, more applicable in this case, right? Because what they proposed has no sort of mechanism from preventing, the victims of harassment from destroying the livelihood of an individual, right? Even if we want to have an eye for an eye system, it's not as if you will simply harass him back. It means you may send him, threatening emails, you may threaten his own family, you may find out what the address of a person is, and inflict physical harm upon that person's house. You can do all sorts of things which, quantitatively speaking, may probably be made worse than the act being conducted in this case. Therefore, the entire eye for an eye sort of system itself is unregulated in this case. Now, the second idea is, POI asked, well, even if we don't have a judicial system, why not have simply forum moderators who are impartial, who are sort of independent judges, unofficial independent judges online, instead of having such a system, right? Because under the system, they haven't provided us with any sort of criteria as to what sort of harassment and under which circumstances people will be permitted to do this sort of thing, right? Because from my experience with online forums, flame wars happen quite often, and people don't like each other. If people start revealing each other's identities, a war which happens merely on a forum will probably be expanded elsewhere as well. That is probably a pretty bad thing, and may lead to other people who aren't related to this sort of incident having their own lives being negatively infringed upon. We don't want that. Now, the Deputy Prime Minister comes up and says, well, the issue with minors which we raised is not an issue because people online have common sense. I think that is a pretty ridiculous statement, precisely because people who are online are oftentimes use the online means of communication as a means to venting their anger, and probably a means to venting a person's anger is probably not such a bad thing itself because it doesn't lead to physical harm, and we find that venting a person's anger online can also be a means as to preventing worse crimes from taking place. So we find that to be actually a bad thing. And the second idea was, well, people will have a clearer communication of their messages and they will have more tolerance. The fear of being punished and be revealing one's identity does not lead to more tolerance. No, more tolerance means you love another person regardless of their own identity and what they are doing, not because you fear that your own livelihood will be destroyed. That is an absurd sort of society they imagine. We think that our society, the vision of our society, is better than the vision they have from their standpoint. Now, moving on to my constructive case, because there's a lot of stuff I want to cover. Now, the judicial system has four main characteristics I want to cover. One, there's an independent judiciary. Number two, we have a system of appeals. Number three, we have consistent outcomes. And number four, you're innocent until proven guilty, which is extremely important in this case. Number one, the independent judiciary, right? What we're saying here is the judges are the ones being harassed. The reason why we have judges who are not the victims of crimes is precisely because they are impartial. It is precisely because they consider both sides of the case. It is precisely because there is evidence and they know the exact laws and what sort of regulations can be enforced, right? They don't arbitrarily enforce laws accordingly to how they see fit. Right? There is a sort of legal precedent, and they follow that sort of legal precedent. Number two, the system of appeals, right? Especially with minors, one should consider the sort of background as to what happened and what led to the sort of harassment. What happens if perhaps the harassment happened from a separate social network? The other person started it off, and as a result, this was a sort of repercussion of anger, right? There was a dialogue of anger. People don't consider that, right? A jury and a judge would consider that. They would consider that perhaps it is a sort of crime of passion, and therefore we should deal with it differently, and therefore the sort of penalty being infringed should be lighter. System of appeals. Number three, consistent outcomes, right? This is the most important thing. What happens if someone does not have a Facebook account? What happens if someone's identity is merely a name and you can't find their address? Then probably the sort of penalty they want is very light, right? And therefore, there isn't much of a satisfaction for the victim. What happens if that person has hundreds of accounts? What happens if that person happens to be the CA of this tournament? This would destroy their own livelihood, as explained by my partner. This would destroy their entire way of life, and the punishment being infringed would be way worse. So we see that we have, the sort of people who conduct these sort of crimes as the narrative as presented by the side government, these crimes are dealt with completely differently. And it is a completely unjust system which leads to a complete outcry from the public, whether that public exists within the internet or whether it exists within the real world. We don't want an outcry, we want less anger within the world of the internet, we don't want more of it. And number 4, you are innocent until proven guilty. That's extremely important. Why is it important? Because sometimes, perhaps what happens within an online forum, things aren't what they seem, right? Perhaps the sort of person who was asking or who was responding to Facebook's message happened to be your friend, right? What happens if that person who was responding to a Facebook message, tried to respond to something else, or posted a picture of something which could be considered to be insulting to another person in a form of harassment, whereas in their own form of cultural phenomenon, it is not a form of harassment, right? I'll give you an example of that, right? I come from a country named Greece. We happen to like, the sort of black humor. We do like, making jokes about ourselves. We do like to be very sarcastic with each other. But that sort of cultural mindset is not shared by everyone. And something which I may say in public may consider to be offensive in another culture. But unfortunately, the intention there is not harmful, right? So the intention has to do with innocent until being proven guilty, right? And we find that intentions are what should deal with penalties, right? Sometimes mistakes do happen, and precisely with the sort of minors that my partner explained, right? Sometimes you do make mistakes, and you do know you need to get back to the job. And precisely, in terms of the effectiveness of the judicial system online, well, there are steps being made forward, right? Perhaps we're not as effective as we want to be, but perhaps we can have, online sort of policing systems, which does take place, for example, in countries such as the UK, where we are starting to have internet laws which sort of describe the sort of decorum which is acceptable within a society, within an internet forum. We find that such progress can be legal, and that sort of progress can be sort of, practical as well, because we can have better programs, we can have better algorithms, which sort of, find the sort of words or phrases which are unacceptable, and we can sort of regulate them. We can censor them, we can ban the users, but we don't destroy their livelihood. We don't allow citizens to take law on their own hands. Ladies and gentlemen, we want an independent judiciary. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't want citizens and the victims of crime taking the law on their hands, because this opens up a can of worms, and that leads to a worse society. That is why we oppose them.
Thank you so much. And now it's my pleasure to call upon the member from UK.
One quick question to the panel before I start. That is, if you grant me an exception to, after my speech, go quickly to the bathroom. I will leave all my cell phones here. I will not do any point of information, because I'm almost fainting.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it okay that we just carry on with the debate?
Yeah, of course.
Okay,
No,
no problem at all.
Thank you very much. So, dear panel, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to tell you today is that this online prosecution is the beginning and the start of the official prosecution, that there is a difference between public opinion and law, and that this kind of prosecution is more efficient and the only one that can protect these vulnerable people that are suffering in the age of internet. But before that, a quick point of rebuttal on the last speech of first position, and afterwards the rest of the rebuttal is within our case. In regard to this point of the judicial system, first, they're saying that they are innocent until proven guilty. And this is related to the matter of public opinion. Yes, we agree that, but by blaming or revealing their identities on the internet, we are not automatically making them guilty. We are just changing the public opinion on that. And like if we provide false or a poor argumentation on the basis that we are providing the identity, then people will not believe in that easily. There is this independence that we're talking from, and we say again, this is independent from the public opinion. For example, in corruption cases, at the moment that they are investigating you, already the public opinion finds that because there was smoke, maybe they are investigating them because they have reasons for that, okay? So also, they tell us that, oh, we have these identities, they can have these people can have hundreds of accounts. Yes, but they only have one identity, okay? You cannot be two persons at the same time. And oh, what if the CA of this tournament do something bad? We say that if they do something bad, then they should not be against CAs, okay? It's legitimate to do that. And the equity panel of the tournament or of the internet will condemn them and reveal their identity, because the intentions are different from the results, okay? And there is a difference that even if the public opinion thinks that you have done something wrong, you can still rehabilitate. So on comparative, we have this people that are vulnerable and suffering, and then we have these other people that of course need to be protected. But in this case, they are deemed less worthy than the ones that are bullied. And why is that? This brings us to our first one. That is, the online persecution is the start of the offline persecution. Firstly, because anonymity drives the internet, okay? People hide behind fake accounts like in forums, 4chan, message boards, or private messages, okay? The success of Facebook was actually reversing this trend and enforcing that accounts were verified, okay? Secondly, hiding behind these kind of fake accounts incentivizes harassment in a way that doesn't happen in the offline world, okay? Because there is a difference between online and offline. That is your face, okay? Your face is shown, your body is shown. When you are bullying someone in real life, you are vulnerable to them. But if you are online, you are behind a wall, an online wall, okay? This means that you can commit more harassment because you don't fear that people know who you are, that they know where you live, and that they will be able to beat you on a one-to-one conflict, okay? They don't fear, okay? And so basically this leads to either trolling, okay? This leads to revenge porn, okay? Also, you can simulate being another person, another identity online, okay? This can lead you to be friendly, okay? And then deceive people. We've seen this like in case of child porn, okay? Or bullying that like you are a boy, there is this girl, and then like you think you simulate that you're another boy, like you create an account, like you make her fall in love with you, and then in the end you reveal the whole sham, and like she becomes so stressed that eventually she suicides. This is a real life example, okay? Thirdly, we believe that revealing the identity to everyone is the only way to get official attention, as we did in our POI. Why? 2 points on this matter. Firstly, because reputation, as I was telling, is key in real life, okay? Learning the identity will disincentivize people to continue to do these things in the first place, okay? Because identity works as a mark and a proxy for your social position. And social position is the key to the life we live in our social world, because we are social animals, so people don't want to lose it. So by supporting this kind of revealment or revealing this kind of identity is a very strong incentive that is very different from the legal one, as I'm going to explain afterwards, so that people stop doing these kinds of harassment, okay? And this is like, as examples for this, and why is this legitimate? For example, as they were talking also about the Greeks, like ostracization, okay, happens in society very often, okay? And this is legitimate, okay? Because also, if like someone is going to like prevention jail, people will already like, even if he's not deemed guilty for a while, public opinion will have that feeling that they have done something wrong to be like under investigation. And this will ensure, okay, that people, if they do these kinds of things and if their identities are revealed, they have an incentive to rehabilitate themselves in order to return or recover the previous social position they had before. So we believe this is even good to the bullies. For example, we have the example Cecil the lion, okay, that like the guy who killed the lion, okay, he got his business like destroyed because no more customers would like to go to them. Like he didn't even commit a crime. There was this legal vacuum because killing lions can be legal, but this was not socially acceptable behavior. So now the only chance for him to recover his professional and social status is to redeem himself and ask for the forgiveness of the people. Lastly, we can't wait to have these more prosecutors in the judicial system because it is very slow, okay? The problem is very urgent. These people are suffering right now, every day, because everyone is online, or almost everyone, the most educated people. So on comparative, we are protecting these vulnerable people, okay? Instead of the protection, we feel this is okay because the vulnerable people that are bullied feel abandoned if there is no other solution or if the legal system is too slow, okay? Also, we don't have enough money in these times of crisis today, and also we cannot train enough prosecutors to be able to deal with these ways efficiently, okay? Even if they delete the accounts, as opposition tries to tell us, they will just keep creating another ones. Like even if they start investigating them, like the investigation could take like 6 months or 1 year, and during that time they will keep harassing more people. So basically they will create these further problems, okay? Point to first. Second.
Well, don't you really confuse prosecution with ruling instead of a court? Take a look at the case of Emma Sulkowicz, for example. The court said no, the prosecution in New York said no, we won't prosecute that, there's reasonable doubt, and we cannot prosecute it under the rule of law. But still, that poor guy will never rehabilitate himself. It is a judgment, not prosecution.
What will this create is exactly this public awareness that we are trying to tell will push like a lot of attention to this. So the prosecutors will be able to channel these kind of cases to the law system, and so the law system will deal appropriately with this kind of thing. So on comparative, okay, we understand these people might lose, but they are like, they lose because they did bad things. So we are protecting the vulnerable people who like don't like did anything wrong. So this online community, okay, also feel empathy for the people. Okay, they are highly educated citizens that are on the internet, so they don't want to make more people feel bad because they know that like, if an eye for an eye, the world will go blind, okay? Lastly, and our last point is that it is more efficient, okay? Basically, because some crimes cannot be easily prosecuted or investigated offline. This is the case of racism and hate speech, okay? For example, offline, like, people can suspect and they can break a group, okay? Or like they can spend a lot of money, like in the last motion, in the last debate, to infiltrate and deceive those people. But that is very complicated, as we understand from the last debate. So here, online, we can find evidence and we can like find the true identities of these people without spending this money. So basically, this will be exposed, and it will be more efficient to like attack these kinds of crimes that fall into the vacuum of the law system. So basically, on comparative, side government believes these vulnerable people need to be protected now. And the other people can be rehabilitated afterwards and return and recover their public opinion status. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. And now let's call on the member of opposition here.
Okay, first of all, some words to first prop. First prop basically told us that public opinion that everyone will accuse everyone else of harassment, and that is why harassment will be much more sensible topic, and much more people will refrain from harassment. What we think is much more likely to happen, if that actually is true, what First Prop says, is that everyone will think, well, if everyone else is insulting everyone else or is accusing everyone else of harassment, then harassment can't be such a bad thing. If everyone does it, and it is less likely that actual harassment, where really a criminal offense could have been seen, and where court prosecution would have been appropriate, will not be prosecuted anymore, because public opinion will obviously shift, because everyone keeps on getting accused of harassing other people. So then again, next point, second prop. The problem really is that you need to know ahead of time, before you commit a crime or offend anyone, what will be a punishable act. And it cannot only be based on subjective feelings, and harassment is very individual, it is subjective, whether I feel harassed or not, there's no objective reasons you can categorize it. No, always has a very subjective component, and thus anyone who could possibly offend anyone else cannot know possibly beforehand what that particular person will find offensive, which makes this a moot point with second process. And then they say, okay, actually this is some sort of new sort of online prosecution which will lead to online prosecution. I already said it in my offline prosecution, I already said it in my POI, that is not necessarily true, but maybe true. But even if it is true, and even if the one who is then a defendant or being prosecuted is, even if the prosecution drops the case or a court rules in favor of the defendant, still there won't be any rehabilitation, because there will be 1,000 posts with 10K likes on Facebook and 10K retweets on Twitter, and what else not, articles, blog entries about the case on the internet, and they will persist for all eternity, and you will never be able to get rid of it. And that is the point second prop didn't get. Second prop is confused about prosecution, which means someone is accused of a crime, and prosecution checks whether or not it is reason enough to actually go to a court trial, or whether they have to drop the case because there's reasonable doubt. They mistake that with the court rulings, which again is another step in a fair trial in any under the rule of law, because the court can still have reasonable doubt after the prosecution thinks they have to bring the case before the court, and then say we have too much doubt still, and so the defendant has to go free. And if that is the case, that is a judgment. It is not prosecution anymore. What you are actually arguing for is judgment of the people based on their subjective feelings, if they feel harassed or not, because what actually happens once I reveal the identity of someone, even if the CIA of this tournament is all my peer groups on Facebook, even all the peer groups on Facebook, in this case the debaters, will be much inclined, especially my friends, to like that post and to agree with me. other people will also be inclined to agree with me accusing someone of being of having done harassment, just because I accuse the person of being someone who does harassment, because it's only natural and in very much the human psychology to not associate with a possible offender if you can associate with the victim, because that is moral high ground. So even more people who like that post will be reposted, and this will basically be a never-ending story and will become even worse, even worse, even worse. And this is why we think we need to definitely reject this propositional model, because it does actually stand against the rule of law. It does a lot of harm to society. It stands against the personality rights of anyone who is being accused, and rehabilitation is absolutely impossible. Okay, let me go into my material. Okay, in any state where the rule of law is the basic principle, we have to adhere to the principle of fair trial, which always means that there's a difference between being accused of something and being judged by a court and having a punishment. And what this side of the house does is punish people who have not been judged by anyone and never had the chance to defend themselves or speak for themselves in any way that could possibly change the matter, because there has been a prejudgment by all the 50,000 people who now, after my speak of 4 minutes and 30 seconds, will have liked that post because it goes so damn viral, as the same with the mattress girl, which you all have heard about and which never can be proven. I do not want to stand here and say Emma Sulkowicz is not actually, has not been raped, but I just cannot tell, and I stand here and tell you it is not fair to say someone else will be punished for his life, not only in virtual space, but also in reality, because there's spillover effects. If I have 50,000 likes on a post that accuses me of harassing girls, what will happen is, if I try to get a job, I won't get the job, because no one will be crazy enough to take that risk, that reputational risk. What will happen is many, many more bad implications for me, which are very real in my personal life. I may even be attacked on the streets because everyone believes that. I tell you, this is not how the rule of law can work. This is not what we can let people do. Okay.
Actually, a good example of this building tolerance is gender equality issues online. You have people who are saying that, okay, this person is harassing, blah, blah, blah. They are responding to that, and you actually have a dialogue that creates understanding between the parties.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think a dialogue that creates some sort of secure space and everyone loves each other is what's usually happening in the internet. In the internet, what's usually happening is the opposite. There's a shitstorm and both sides hate each other. Those who will ever be accused of being having harassed someone will hate those who accuse someone, and will also hate those who may be righteous victims, who may actually be victims. This also does harm to actual victims, because they cannot really go out and tell, I have been harassed. They should generally go to court, but if with your model everyone is accused of harassing people, it is much more likely that that group who is permanently being accused of harassing other people will then think everyone who is accused of harassing people is innocent, which is not necessarily true. I think that is another harm, and a harm for those who are actually victims. We think the internet works that way. It is not fair. It is just based on speculations often, and shitstorm the Twitter and Facebook work as a sensation. There's only need to generate sensation. And if the identity is revealed of someone, there will not be the possibility of him or her to be ever rehabilitated, maybe by a court, but not by society. And the harm is real for you. So in the end, we have on our side the public interest of everyone who is ever accused of harassing and cannot defend themselves. We have on our side the rule of law, and we have on our side the basic personality rights of everyone in the society, and this is why I'm proud to oppose.
Okay, thank you very much. And now it's my pleasure to call on the government brief.
So firstly, the entire opposition has been based this case and based their values and based their framework on the judicial system now. But there is this difference. They tell us, oh, there's this difference between being prosecuted and being trial. The problem is, with the judicial system, is that you have something called the secret of justice, right? So if a person is being prosecuted, no one knows about it, therefore there are no direct impacts. What we're bringing is a direct impact method, which also comes to serve our point that the judicial system takes so long, people will still get harassed, people will still get in trouble, people will still be feeling sorry about themselves, people will still get depressions, people will still suicide because of this, while the judicial system is deciding if the person is guilty or not, based on the lack of little or no evidence. So there's this problem with the judicial system that still stands, no matter what they say, and their entire case is based on the framework that the judicial system is the best thing ever. We do agree that the judicial system should be the best thing ever. We do agree that it should be improved. However, we don't have time for that while people are suffering, right? It's like if there's a war going on somewhere, we're not going to wait until, yeah, let's see if it's worth it or not, let's see if it's worth it or not, and then in the meantime, tens of millions of people die, right? We intervene, we have to act, we have to solve these problems as fast as possible, because these problems are, as first Grove said, increasing due to the internet, due to the exposure on the internet, right? So, but also, they have left completely unanswered two of our points. Firstly, the point about racism, right? Racism is not only hard to prosecute, hate speech is not only hard to prosecute, but it's a main point because people, as Hugo said, because they hide behind anonymity, they are more open to be themselves online, right? A guy can pass you on the street and not be a racist, but then he gets home, he gets to your computer, and he knows he can be a racist because no one knows him. Only his friends from the racist group, right? And they keep having these racist conversations and keep propagating these ideas. And if I, for example, join that group not knowing what it was about, and I watch it, I can then reveal their public information. Everyone will know that they are racist. Everyone will be aware, because eventually racism takes into action. But more than that, people will know who they are, and then eventually can find some reason in real life to prosecute them, right? Because these ideals are dangerous in on itself, and that is a danger for the entire world, because the internet is for everyone, right? So, also, yeah, weak evidence won't hold, right? Weak evidence doesn't hold anywhere. We don't need a judicial system to know that weak evidence doesn't hold. If you try to argue something on the internet, let's say like on Reddit, and you don't provide a single fact, people will just go and tell you, until you provide us with a single fact, we'll just keep arguing that this is not true, and we will find all the million sources. So the internet also has that possibility that people aren't that gullible and don't just believe everything they're told. Therefore, these cases of revealing that public information can actually work because people are more informed. People are on the internet because they want to be informed and not just spend their days watching kitty cat videos, okay? So, framework image. We tell you that victims or watchers can decide this kind of harassment, right? Not on the basis of, oh, that guy did one remark. Sometimes there's some misinterpretation, yeah, we can give that. But most of the times, harassment is clear, especially, as Hugo said, in racism cases. There's not that much of a leeway in order to decide or not if something is racist, right? I mean, yeah, sure, we can do black humor jokes. If people don't know where to do black humor jokes, they probably shouldn't be doing it online where kids can see it, when everyone can see it, right? That's a problem in on itself. So that's a problem because people think they're legitimized to make black humor jokes. Why should they be doing that on the internet knowing that it's open for everyone, right? That's harassment. Even if people say, oh, but it wasn't our intention to harass. That doesn't make that the people doesn't get triggered, that doesn't make that the people doesn't get hurt, that doesn't make that the person eventually commits suicide because everyone just finds it so easy to make jokes about their ethnicity, about their education condition, or about their living conditions, right? That doesn't impede that these actions have a direct result that does be resolved now. And what is the problem? We have to resolve this now, and by exposing these persons, by exposing their identities, there's some backlash from the community, right? The internet will tell them, you're bad guys. They will post their photos on forums and say, this guy is a racist. Be careful with the type of ideas that can invade you. Be careful with this guy because he spent the whole day harassing you, right? While this is going on, if we do a complaint to the judicial system, it will take years, months, until something gets out of it, and the person will still be spreading its ideas, will still be harassing, so therefore nothing gets done. And even when something gets done, it's already taken too long and taken too much consequences. Sure, first.
But it's not as if someone murdered someone else, right? Just because you're psychologically harassed, you can't wait for 3 months until the judicial system has a decision.
Yeah, for those 3 months, you're probably in counseling, you're probably with the depression, you probably just wrecked your whole family environment. Yeah, sure, those 3 months seem like a really happy place for me to be. This is a problem that clearly, as seen in this POI, the opposition doesn't understand. Yes, we would prefer if the judicial system could help us. Yes, of course we would. Everyone here wants justice to be made the right way. The problem is, in this case, there's too much of an urgency because of the direct impacts that this causes on people who aren't protected. Even minors are affected by this because they see everything that is on the internet. Much more worrisome than the problem of minors harassing someone is the problem of minors watching harassment and thinking that is a legitimate thing to do, right? That's the biggest issue. So everyone gets affected by this. Even if someone is just watching harassment, the person can feel bad about it, and therefore, as a legitimacy, as First Prof said, to basically come up and say, these guys are harassing that guy. Even if it's not my problem, I have a duty to help my fellow humans and, well, just make sure that no one gets harassed, because harassment is a bad thing. The judicial system takes too long. Sometimes it's ineffective. It's really hard to search for evidence online. So if we go and display these, images, people will backlash immediately. There will be consequences. And the people who are getting harassed will stop getting harassed because the people that we're harassing have their public information revealed and will be careful because they don't want more backlash or even personal life backlash, like real life backlash. And so, the people directly involved, the victims, are actually better. But more than that, the harassers can eventually be rehabilitated. They have an incentive to better their discourse, to know that the internet isn't the place where you can go and say whatever comes to your mind, no matter who it affects, but it will have a clear conscience of what they should do. And therefore, their discourse is better. But more, their rehabilitation isn't the priority, as Hugo said, in any way. We are here to prevent suffering. Right? If the harassers take a little bit more longer to rehabilitate, oopsie-doo, too bad, they shouldn't be harassing people in the first place. Maybe that will teach them that harassment is a bad thing. So there are little to no disadvantages, although we can consider the points there might be public offenses, there might be something, yeah, but this leading to an eye goes far beyond the stretch of reason, and they have never proven how this will logically work. More than that, they basically framework all their case on the judicial system, which we have proven more than once that is ineffective. Therefore, because it's urgent, because we need to protect these people, because we need to protect victims, this motion should be approved. Now it's my pleasure to call the opposition witness.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. To sum up this debate, I want to talk about 2 points. First of all, I want to talk about why possible offenders in the internet needs some kind of special protection because the power of the possible victims are way too high. And secondly, I want to talk about this, why there are direct harms to individuals if their personal information getting revealed, especially in the internet, how a human being works in the internet, in the social media. But first of all, some points of rebuttal to the whip speech of the proposition. First of all, there was the idea that the people can getting warned in the internet for racists, for people like who are sexist, etc. I think he has one problem in his speech. Social media doesn't work like an information tool where you can inform yourself and think about rationally. Oh, okay, it's okay. Social media works that you spread the word, and every user who's spreading the word can interpret the situation by themselves and giving words in the mouth of the possible offender. The problem we see there is that you have no right to self-defense. It's what Nicolas said in his mention. If you have 100 times you shared the post and 100 times you said something like an own interpretation of the situation, there's no chance that you have the right that you can every time defend yourself in this situation, because most of the time it's very subjective. Secondly, there's a chance of abuse. Every time when he talks about jokes, we're talking about before about harassment, now we are talking about jokes, we are talking about very, individual feelings about what is harassing and what's not harassing. There's a kind and a large possibility of abuse to the situation, because it's very subjective, because it's very individual. What you think is the joke, and what do you think what is harming in the situation. What you do at the end, and what is leading this model is, and the second government, is that there's no freedom of speech on the internet, because everyone can be offended in the internet, because there is everyone in the internet, and there will be every time one troll or one people when there's just a joke to say I'm offended and make a shitstorm out of it, and we think this is problematic. Now to my own points, to my own material. So why do we need this protection? For two reasons. Because the internet has an own mechanism, because human beings have their own mechanism. The internet, in the internet you are kind of anonymous. You don't have to meet someone face to face. You don't have to tackle him directly. You're very protected in the situation. So it's really easy to judge people on the internet. It's really easy to make a sentence, this is bad, this is a bad guy, this is the one we have to judge. On the other side, human beings are, it's very easy to show solidarity to possible victims. It's very hard to show solidarity to possible offenders, because it's very, more peaceful if you go into the person you are saying, oh my God, he is a bad guy, you don't want to defend the bad guy. What is kind? If you mix these two things, kind of how human being works and how the internet works, is that people getting stigmatized. The first opposition started with that point. If they're saying, okay, there's kind of problems, there's like a mob which can follow you in real life. Some points Nicholas added to this point. First of all, it has really directly effects on your real life in this situation. Of course, when you're searching for a job, etc. Because the internet don't forget. The internet don't forget what they are standing. Even if there was a court trial, even if the media attention led to a search trial, even if you get spoken free in the trial, you have the problem that the internet saved this information, saved the shitstorm, and saved this information that he was the bad guy in the situation. So there is no kind of cleaning up your identity. There is no kind of getting back to society. It is there. So what we're seeing is that the people who are possible offenders have much more power than the victim, because it's easier to spread the word, because it's easier to get liked, because it's easier to feeling offended. And it's very hard in this situation to say, no, I didn't do anything. And secondly, and that was my opinion in the first speech of the proposition, is very important there, because it's very subjective what information you give in the situation. It's, for example, a different thing if I just give a sentence of a whole conversation which might be offended, but the whole conversation, the whole relationship between two people can very be otherwise interpreted, otherwise understanding in the situation. So it's very easy to make someone looking harassing in the situation, because you are the one who chooses which material you give to the internet and which material you give to the public opinion. So, second point, why there are direct terms. First of all,
you also can clean your own personal criminal record, and you are more concerned, the entire side of the opposition is more concerned about what happens to the harassers than to the victims, who are the direct stakeholders of this case.
Because, and that was the whole point of the opposition, if there's a real harassment, you can still go to the trial, you can still prosecute them by trial. And the thing is, if there's a real harassment, the people will getting, they will get him punished by the law. And we think it's better, because the law system is searching for real evidence. The thing is, in the internet, there's no real evidence. It's like what we are feeling about what is wrong, what is right. And people getting prejudged in the situation, and that leads to my second point, because the internet, don't forget. So the problem we have in this situation is that often there are shitstorms, and there are situations where you getting in bad spot, where you get in bad spotlight. And the problem is that the people are trying to arrest this person. For example, in Germany, there's a whole huge problem. If somebody, for example, is getting called sexist or does anything like, violation of women, or you are racist, the people getting harassed a lot in this situation. They get even pushed out of cities, by example. They get thrown eggs, they get their cars getting, the tire getting stretched. So you can't go any further, because your real life getting involved in this situation just because you have an online discussion in the situation and you're able to do this. So this is problematic. The second problem, even if you're right, even if this leads to a trial in this situation, if people are getting out of the situation, getting out of the trial and free spoken, you have the problem that the people can't never clear their identity up again, because it's really problematic, because a clear trial is nothing you can spread on the internet. There's nothing you can spread like on Facebook, because it's not the sensation in the situation. It's not very interesting to say someone was spoken free. It's interesting if people are getting offended. And we see there's an unbalancing situation of power, and that's why we have to protect the people who might be possible offenders. Thank you.